Hey you, are you wasting your time on social media again? Your brothers and sisters in Islam Net from Norway are establishing a masjid, a dawah center. Establishing a masjid to convey the message of Islam is one of the best deeds a Muslim can do. There's a huge need for it in Norway. You know this and I know this. So that makes the reward even greater. So give generously and Allah Azza wa Jal will give you even more.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you guys doing? Many of you will know that Russel Brand now has made the news and people are accusing him of some very heinous crimes. And whereas I don't really want to speak about those allegations or get into that, to be honest with you, I do want to make a point which I think is applicable and relevant and poignant and pertinent for the modern day, which is the following, is that in Islam we have a concept called nikah. Okay, which is an Islamic marriage. It is the contract of Islamic marriage. This will become relevant in a second, or the reason why I'm telling you this will become relevant in a second. Now, this concept of nikah, for all intents and purposes, actually, it solves a lot of the problems which are happening nowadays relating to sexual assault allegations and so on. Or at least to a great extent, it facilitates some kind of I would say alleviation of the problem. Why? Because when the nikah actually takes place in Islam, it's a very simple process, by the way, where the man and the woman get married and there are two witnesses and then consent is given and taken in that context and is documented. Now, this process, although it could take, technically it takes about 3 to 5 minutes. I mean, it can be done in 3 to 5 minutes. It actually serves the purpose, not just a spiritual purpose of making the matter holy in front of God, but it actually serves a practical functionality, which is that it would, at least on paper, it should, at least on paper, alleviate some of these issues. Because if consent is given and it's known that in this nikah, after this nikah, that both become halal for one another, or both become legitimately, or intercourse becomes a legitimate course of action, then I would say, if someone were to say that this was an unwanted sexual attention in certain contexts, then I would say legally, it would probably make sense in most countries' laws that the defense would be stronger if the person has consent being given in front of two people. That's one thing I want to bring to the table, because Islam is a solution for a lot of these issues, you see. It's not just a spiritual solution, but we would say it's a practical solution. So although I don't want to speak about the specific case of Russel Brand vis-a-vis what's going on with him, these allegations and so on, I don't want to speak about that because I'm not really fully aware of what's going on. But what I do want to say is that if someone conducts their business in the manner that Islam prescribed, then the matter becomes much more professional and less problems are attached to such things. What I want to react to today, in fact, is something completely different, which is one of the only interviews I've seen Russel Brand speak about Islam and about Muslim people. And there are two kind of timestamps in particular which I looked at in his discussion with 𝙗𝙪𝙞𝙤, which I think are pertinent. So let's look at the first one and then react to it together.
Right, and suicide bombing.
So it's just aesthetics, really.
No, it's not.
Suicide bombing looks bad. A drone bombing.
It's not just
nice.
Aesthetics. It's not just aesthetics.
Well, how is it not aesthetics?
Because suicidal people are undeterrable. So jihadists are undeterrable. If the best thing that can happen in an operation is that you die while conducting it, you are the perfect weapon. That's
why would you
I just have to hammer this home.
Go on.
When you're talking about the possibility of something like nuclear terrorism or biological terrorism, that where someone tries to weaponize smallpox and kill 100 million people.
Let's just mention that nuclear terrorism is not hypothetical. It already happened 50 years ago. Underwritten by secularism.
I won't call that nuclear terrorism.
Or nuclear, I don't know.
There was certainly a first
I bet
use
if you're in Nagasaki that day, semantics wouldn't be your primary concern. What should we call that thing? Ow, my teeth.
It's reasonable to ask how the Japanese.
So this is very, very interesting here. You see, I think this was actually a priceless interaction, the back and forth. And in my view, Russel Brand definitely had the upper hand. Now, first and foremost, we could talk about suicide bombing, and we talk about the numbers of people, Muslim people, that actually believe in its legitimacy. We can talk about that on a mass level or on a even on a scholarly level. How many people have given that legitimacy? In fact, this is not the rule, but the exception within the Islamic paradigm, both doctrinally, or you can say theologically, jurisprudentially, as well as sociologically, in terms of what Muslim people believe is legitimate or not legitimate action. That's one thing anyway. That's a conversation we can have another day. But the point being made here by Russel Brand is actually a very powerful point. And notice the reluctance of Sam Harris to take ownership of the fact that, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the two most devastating, we're talking about two of the most devastating detonations that have taken place probably in human history. Okay, and that was detonated by a country who as he mentioned, is got a secular ethic. Its constitutions, or the Constitution of America and the founding, the documents, all of them are secular documents, underwritten by liberalism, social contractarianism, and so on and so forth. It's a liberal democracy for all intents and purposes. Yet they were the ones responsible for this kind of thing. Notice his reluctance to refer to that as terrorism. Why not? And this shows you the double standard here. It shows you the double standard. It shows you the weakness of the argument. So I commend actually Russel Brand on this instant for making this point and saying what he said here. It was, and he's right to point out in the beginning, in fact, that this is just aesthetics, especially considering what he mentions in The Moral Landscape. Sam Harris has written a book called The Moral Landscape. Obviously, he talks about consequentialism. He believes in a kind of moral philosophy called consequentialism, which, by the way, there's no way on an atheistic or naturalistic paradigm to actually prove that consequentialism is true on an objective level. That's one thing anyway. So then it does become about aesthetics. It becomes about what is, and he mentions this himself, is fetishized in the imagination of the Western person, the average Western person. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to respond to or react to is another aspect of this podcast. So let's hear that bit and then come back and respond in kind.
I think that these kind of sort of theoretical tableaus are used to create a false hierarchy and a moral superiority by a dominant culture that subsequently uses thinking of this nature to underwrite the modern day colonization and subjugation of these people on a massive scale. Right, and as barbaric and disgusting as 9/11 was, a daily 9/11 since then, so that a state system can perpetuate itself using rationalism, using comfortable means of executions that glide slyly by all white in the sky, is no better than 9/11 that it was a riposte too.
It is better. So we can talk. So you're invoking many things here which we should treat systematically, things like collateral damage. So you drop a bomb.
I don't even like that language, collateral damage.
It's a euphemism. No, it's a euphemism, but that's the word we use to talk about unintended people getting killed by bombs.
But what is that? Like when 87% of drone strikes result in
fatalities. The data here are hard to get our hands around as well.
People
because
are sort of saying
highly politicized. Yeah.
You see, whenever the argument is being made against the objective fact of secular violence, state violence, which has taken place in the 20th and 21st century on a scale that human history hasn't even seen before that. Human history, forget about religious states and whatever, theocratic states. We're talking about human history has never seen before. You notice that he wants to complicate the situation. Notice that Sam Harris is trying his best to try and muddy the waters. And I have to respect and give props to Russel Brand actually for making these distinctions. And it seems like throughout the interview he was very careful not to fall into what would be seen as an Orientalist discourse. You have to give him credit for that. I think he did go to the School of Oriental and African Studies and done some kind of postgraduate there. One of the key readings that they would read is like, Edward Said's Orientalism or something like that, where the power structures are being discussed. And it is relevant and it's actually very useful because then he's not gullible and naive to these kinds of discourses which are intended to preach to the converted or to preach to the choir in one way or another. The thing is, Sam Harris himself cannot substantiate why morals should be one way or not another on naturalism or atheism in the first instance. And in fact, on his deterministic worldview, he shouldn't even be holding those perpetrators responsible for anything, because a suicide bomber is no different from any kind of bomber according to his worldview. He's written a book on free will and determinism, and he believes that there is no such thing as a libertarian free will or compatibilistic free will. So, in other words, people are not in charge of their emotions. Free will is, for all intents and purposes, an illusion. So if you look at the package of Sam Harris's ethics and moralities, you'll find that the way he puts the case really is a very weak way, and is self-contradictory when you compare all of the different things that he believes in. But having said all of this, Sam Harris would never discuss Islam with Muslim people. Have you ever seen Sam Harris discuss Islam with Muslim people? In fact, I've challenged him many times. I'm not even going to waste my breath challenging him again. He's become quite irrelevant, actually, and a weak opponent he would probably be. He tried to block me on Twitter some time ago when I challenged him. Me and him had a back and forth, and he ran away. He scurried along and put his tail between his legs. But I have to commend Russel Brand on this interaction, and I hope it was useful to you guys and beneficial as well. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us, whoever builds a mosque for Allah, Allah will build for him a similar house in Jannah. And we know the great reward that will not only be gained, but rather will fill your grave after your death. Whenever someone prays there, whenever someone gives shahada in the masjid, whenever someone learns something in the masjid, yes, that will be something that you'll have on your scale.